Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it. Just a little about myself. My name is Jamie Willis-Rose. I'm a Power Platform developer at Applied Information Sciences. I have experience with Power Platform, a little bit of Dynamics, but I actually came to this through SharePoint. That was my gateway, if you will, into this world. I have experience with nonprofits, broadcasts, some government agencies. I am a user group leader in the Washington, D.C. area, and obviously I'm a speaker. Feel free if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter. If you have a camera phone and you want to scan that QR code that's with your LinkedIn app, that will connect me with you on LinkedIn. But yeah, feel free to connect with me. A little bit about my company. Again, I work for Applied Information Sciences. As we mentioned earlier in the prelude, we were just named Partner of the Year for Power Apps and Power Automate. This is a big accomplishment for any organization, any partner. But obviously, for me, I'm really excited because I just joined AAS in February, so this is like starting out with the Yankees. It's pretty awesome. So I only contributed a tiny bit to their success, but I will take the credit nonetheless. But if you have any questions about AIS and what we do, feel free to reach out to me either after I finish presenting, or we can talk later. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to you more about AIS. All right, let's get started. My top 10 tips. I'm going to start off with Power Apps. Hopefully you guys are familiar with Power Apps, so I don't have to explain what that is. Power Apps, first tip is environments. I don't know how many of you are using environments today as part of your overall development process, but I highly recommend within your organization you have a tenant and take advantage of environments, especially if you're paying for Power Apps. It's a little different if you're not paying for premium licensing, but if you are, take advantage. You can actually create environments for development. Do all your development in a development environment. Work in the development and then export to a separate test environment where you have a separate set of users, and then they can test it and they can work on it and find the bugs that you're going through. So these two environments together, hopefully you'll reduce a lot of the bugs that you'll have, so that when it actually goes into production, you don't have to worry about end users actually dealing with bugs. So that's my number one tip. If you don't do anything else, like definitely do this as a best practice. If you want to know more about this concept of environmental architecture and then get into more detail, I highly recommend going to this URL. AIS literally wrote the book on Power Platform Adoption Framework, and it's powerplatform.af. It's free. It's actually on GitHub. This link just resolves to GitHub. It's an open source document, so you can actually contribute if you want to. So please check it out, download it. There's a PDF, but you can also just go into GitHub and read everything. And you can, as part of that, you can read about environments and how we recommend environment architecture. All right, so that's tip number one, environments. The next one I'm going to talk about is the results view. So let's take a closer look at what happens when you're looking at a formula. So here I have a formula that's pretty complex looking, and I want to figure out what's happening here. So what I can do is I can come in, and with the results view, I can actually select part of this formula, and I can help see what's going on. So I'm going to click accounts, and then I'm going to click here, and you'll see right down below there, it's going to show me all the results for that. So this is the actual data associated with accounts, which is an actual CDS entity. Sorry, DataFlex Pro. And here you'll see I have all the states showing. So I've got Texas, Tennessee, Kansas, Washington, California. I'm going to click the next formula out to filter, and you'll see what happens here. Suddenly now all I have is Texas, and that's because I'm actually filtering only showing Texas. So you can actually navigate your formula, and you can see in real time the data being returned. So this will help you diagnose. If you're not seeing what you're expecting, this can help you figure out, especially in a really complicated formula. So I'm scrolling over now, and I'm going to take a look at the name column. Sorry, it's taking me a while to get there. But here I have the name column. You can see it's not in any order. But if I click on sort by columns, all of a sudden, boom, now it's sorted alphabetically because it's ascending by name.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So I'm going to go to concat. This formula actually will take what I just did and actually turn it into a string. And I can actually create HTML this way. And if I go to the last block, I'm now wrapping all that with these HTML code. And the result of that can be seen in the control itself, which is an HTML control. So I have an actual list like this. And that's what the end user will see. So now let's do another example. I have two formulas that are built in. One's called now and one's called today. And they're different. And they have different uses. So if I click on now, you'll see that it's a date time. It actually has a timestamp associated with it. So if you use the now function, you're getting the date and the time. Whereas if I use today, I'm just getting the date. So understanding when to use which formula, it really depends on what you're doing and if you need time or not. Last but not least, here I've got a formula that's using a connector. This is a newly renamed Microsoft 365 users connector. And here I'm seeing my name, but if I click in one, now I see all the possibilities besides name, display name. I could get all this other data from the same connector. So if I want to know what else is available, I can see it right there inside the results view. So this can be really helpful. Especially if you're trying something new, maybe you're trying a data source you're not familiar with or trying a connector you're not familiar with, this can be helpful. And I'll have links throughout the presentation and then links at the very end as well. So, and I'll share the slides after I'm done here so you guys can have those. So that's tip number 2, use the results view. The next tip is talking a little bit about how to, oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean that. Oh, didn't realize I was going to show up on top there like that. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, the point is, this is Todd Baginski's method of using the hidden panel trick, which is basically hiding the control on the far left off screen, basically. And sorry about that. I didn't expect it to show up on top there like that. That's a little quirk of PowerPoint there. So the links is here. Everything I just showed that was kind of obscured by that cover up there is in here. I don't want to take any credit for this. This is all Todd's credit, all Todd's doing. So please take a look at this if something you're interested in. But just to summarize, it's really helpful as you build out a Canvas app to document it for yourself and for other developers. So you can actually document each screen, explaining what the purpose of that screen is, what's happening, what you did, what's going on, rather than putting documentation in other places. Put it in the app so that it's with the app at all times. And then you can also put in debugging controls in the same way, so they're not covering up other controls on screen. So you can see them when you're in the editing in the studio, but they'll be slightly off there. So sorry I couldn't demonstrate that quite as well as I hoped, but trust me on this, it's a good trick. The next tip I should say is to use Monitor. So here I have an app, and I'm going to come over here to the Advanced Tools, and I'm going to click on Advanced Tools, and you see 2 options, Monitor and Test. I'll come to Test in a minute. Let's talk about Monitor right now. I'm going to click on Open Monitor. It's going to open it in a new tab, and I'm going to go back to the previous tab, and I'm going to click Play. This will work with any app, but this particular app, what I'm doing is I'm clicking this one button, and it's actually loading a bunch of data. And here you can see now what's actually happening. And I'm going to fast forward because it takes a while. So fast forward about 4 minutes. But as you can see, 1,018 rows load in. and all the data is loaded here in the app, and it tells you everything that needs to be done. It tells you everything that has been done here. If I go back to the monitor, you'll see each row, it has details including when it happened, what the operation was it a success? So if I want to find something, I can use the filter option to filter. And I can filter, let's say, equals get rows. And I'll click apply. And now I'm only seeing options that equal get rows. And then I want to clear the filter, just click clear filter and click apply. Now you can also sort. So just clicking on that will give you the option to sort. Like so. So this is a lot of detail, but there's even more detail if you want it. So if I click on a row, it opens up the right-hand panel that has 4 tabs. The first tab, the default tab, is the details tab, and that gives you a high-level overview of the event or the row. And it's a JSON, if you guys are familiar with JSON. And you can see some of the JSONs actually collapse. So if you need to, you can expand it out by clicking the plus sign and see even more details. So you can find out everything that's happening when your app is running. So you can help diagnose issues as they happen. In addition to the details tab, there's the formula tab. This shows you where in the app this is happening. So at the very top, you've got the name of the formula, the control and the property. And then below that, we have where in the formula this actually is happening. So you can actually see and figure out, oh, if there's an issue, where is this happening in my app? The third tab is the request tab. This is the actual network request. That helps you. Great. The response, if you want to know how the app is getting its responses back from the server, this is what's coming back. I think if any of you have used Fiddler, this will be somewhat familiar in terms of the concept. Another thing you can do is we can actually download results. So I'm going to come here, and you can see I have CSV or JSON. So this could be useful if you need to share these results with someone else on your team. You can download them, and then they can upload it in return and actually analyze those results. So if you're getting a weird error message, you can download the results and upload them, and that could be helpful for debugging. Another thing you can do is you can actually use Monitor with a published app. So if the app is already in production and there's issues, you can come into apps, you can find the app, and you can click on the ellipsis, and you can click monitor, and it will launch the monitor in another tab. And this time, what you're going to do is actually click play published app. And when I do, you'll see it actually launches the app. In a separate tab. And it takes a while to load. And this is, this may be one of the issues. You may get complaints from your users saying, why does it take so long for this to load? Well, this is how you can actually help figure this out, because you can then go back into Monitor and see what's going on. So I'm going to go back, see it's recording. I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to see, oh, look at all these warnings. So this is all on start. All these are happening when the app launches. And you see all these warnings here telling me there's something wrong. So if my app is not behaving well, if it's taking too long to load, this can help you diagnose possible issues. So that was tip number 4, using Monitor. Next, I have a bonus tip. This goes with the Monitor, if you're using monitor, you may want to actually use something called the trace function. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to actually select this particular control. It can be any control in your app, or even can be the on-app's start property if you want, wherever the problem is that you want to diagnose. In this case, my code is located in the timer. So I'm going to select timer, and when I do, you'll see that the on timer end property is there. If that's not the property you want, you can change it. I'm going to select on timer end, and then I'm going to look at my formula. Now, I want to figure out what's happening in my app. So in monitor, so I can use trace to actually send me information into monitor. So just by simply typing in trace, I can then insert information that I can then understand in some context when I'm getting these messages back. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in loading. Let's see here. Now, asterisk loading. And then let's see, space. And I'll do an ampersand. And then I'm going to use work, which is a property. It's a variable, actually. And then I'm going to come in here and next I need to do the severity. This is not required, but it's recommended. So I'm going to have the severity, and there's 4 options. You can do critical error, information, or warning. I'm going to do information. And that's all I'm going to do for right now. There's a 3rd option, but I'm not going to get into it. I'll have a link to the trace function so you can find out how to use this in other situations and you may need. But now that I have that, I can actually use it by going into monitor. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. We save your app. Save early, save often. But especially if you're going to use the monitor. So I'm going to come in here, advanced tools, like I did earlier, click open monitor. I'm going to go back and I'm going to play my app and load the data. And then I'm going to go back here, and now you can see here it says loading categories. And as it scrolls through, you'll see each one of these different entities loading customers. And it's going to come up there loading employees. So every single one. So this helps you understand where you are better. Loading order products. And this may not be exactly what you need. This is an example. Loading shippers. Again, you may have other uses for this. And this may not be necessarily the most useful way of using it, but however you need to diagnose the issue, just imagine it and being able to insert this into your code to help you diagnose a problem that you're having. If you can't figure out what's going on, this can help you diagnose problems. So I'm just scrolling through here real quick here as it loads through all these rows. And it's going to take a sec here to get through all of them. Let's check if anybody has any questions.
I'm not seeing anything in here. I will let you know if some come.
Okay.
Greg
cool,
addressed a couple. Thank you.
All right, great. So everything loaded in fine. I can use, again, the ability to filter and sort. I can filter. So if I do starts with, I can do asterisk like I did. Again, this is just showing you some different ways you can use it. Can be helpful. Like so. Excellent. So there we have it. Everything is loaded in there. And I've been sorting it so I can see different ways of sorting it. And so that's the trace function. All right. I need to just unshare my screen for 1 second. Got to fix something on my next slide, so bear with me here.
Let you know you're already lighting me up. Already a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know. So
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. I will be with you 1 second here. Okay, so this is tip 5. So this is about the Test Studio. So Test Studio is a new feature that has not been put out in GA yet, general availability. It's still experimental. So I would not advise using this in on a production app. But if you have a dev environment, that's a good use case, or if you just want to learn how to use it. If you have your own personal environment, this is another great case for using it. You can click Learn More to learn all about it. I have that link in my slide deck. Now I clicked Open Test and immediately I was given an error message. So in order for it to work, I actually have to turn on an experimental feature. And this is a per app setting. So for every app, you'll have to do this. So I have to come in here, and this is why I don't want to do this with a production app. So for now, at least, you have to come into experimental features and turn on formula error management. And then once I do, I can open up tests. And at a high level, just understand that what this is this is an automated test tool. So this allows you to create automated tests so that you can actually test and retest the same problems, the same steps over and over again to ensure that your app is working as expected. And you can use it, you can create suites, multiple suites, and each suite can have multiple cases, and then each case can have steps. And so best practice is, of course, naming your things so they're useful and you can figure out what they mean, especially if someone else comes along after you to use it. Then what's interesting here is it's sort of a recorder, kind of like a UI flow recorder. So it's actually recording what you do, almost everything you do. So I'm going to come in here and you'll see, I'm not going to do a full test, but I just want to show you real quick. See, I clicked and it recorded that click. But now I'm typing and it's not recording the typing. So it's not a perfect solution yet. But now I'm going to click again and it's going to record the clicks. So I click there, and there it recorded that click. So there's potential here, depending on your use case. Now you also note that this uses the same expression language as Power Apps. So if you're using Power Apps today, if you're writing code in Power Apps, this should be familiar. This is the additional resources. I'll have some more at the end, so you can figure out more about this experimental feature. I definitely think there's a lot of potential here, and I'll have a link to a video. I had it on here the screen a second ago, but apparently I can't have YouTube videos and my videos on the same screen. But actually, your next speaker, Ashley Rogers, I have a link to a video where she was speaking with John Levesque about this. Yeah, so definitely check it out. Anyway, moving on. What we're talking about now is Power Automate. So that's 5 tips for Power Apps. 5 tips. Moving on to Power Automate. Tip number 6 is using manual triggers. When you're starting out and you're creating a flow for the first time, I definitely recommend use a manual trigger. So it's just easier than trying to do any other kind of trigger, because any other kind of trigger requires a lot of effort. Like if it's like when a file gets created, or when when a button that gets clicked or whatever in a Power App, those things can take a lot of time to test if you're trying to figure out and build a complicated flow. So my advice is use a manual trigger with your test, and then with that, using the test function here built in to Power Automate. So you can see here I'm using the manual trigger to actually prompt for a file. I can load in that file and it will run the rest of my flow for me. And so it'll run through all the steps. It'll create the approval process. It'll come through here and it'll do all this stuff here, and then it'll send to Teams. I'll go to Teams, So you can see I can test a lot of the functionality of my flow without having to do anything else. So even though long term I want to use this flow to monitor a folder when a file gets uploaded, I can use a manual trigger as a way of testing it for now. So here I've got my approval, and yes, you can do approvals in Teams. So there we have that. I've got wait for approval. It's done. It's come through, and then my condition here is basically just at the placeholder, just making sure that it's actually working. So basically, it's approved. So that's all. Again, this is just how I test in pieces. So you build it piece by piece, test it as you go, use the manual trigger and the test function as you go, testing it. It's iterative. You know, you'll add a little bit, test it, add a little bit, test it, keep at it until you get it all working, all the pieces. And I will note that you can replace a trigger with another trigger. So if you're worried about that, you can. Although you may have some issues where it will delete any references to that trigger. So if you're referencing anything like an input from a user, that will get deleted out when you delete the manual trigger. But that's not the end of the world, as long as you keep track of where those inputs are. So in this case, I want to talk about flow checker. So this is baked into Power Automate. You probably have noticed it before in the right-hand side here. If you see that red dot, that tells you something's not right. So you can come here and I can click on it and it'll actually show me. If I don't click on it though and I try to hit save, it won't let me save. So even if you don't click on it, it's going to show it to you. So your best bet is just to click on it and figure out what's going on here. So one of the things that it checks for is required field. So here I have got a required field. It's empty. So before I can save it, I have to fill this in. So I'm just going to plug this in. And now the flow checker is good and I can save it. So the flow checker is very helpful that way. Definitely take advantage of that. And you'll see that save you some headaches before you even get to testing. Next is error handling. So error handling is basically what happens when a flow fails. So here I have two runs of this flow that actually failed. And what I want to do is figure out, well, why it failed and how I can fix it. And deal with it, because what you don't want is your end user to have that experience of getting error messages or having nothing happen. So what I have here is I'm going to click on the failed flow, and here are the details about what failed. So it gives you a rough idea of what happened. So it says action move failed, and it gives you the details. And then I can come in here and I can open this up, and you can see the little red exclamation point telling you where it failed. So in this case, the file already exists. And I deliberately set this up so that it wouldn't overwrite files. That you can do that with SharePoint, but I wanted to actually cause an error. So just know that. So let's just say hypothetically that I don't want files to be overwritten. I want to actually handle this error. So what I'm going to do is actually add an action. I'm going to click on this and click add action. And I'm going to send a notice to Teams. I'm going to fast forward a little bit, but basically this is just hard coded in here. I'm sending it to myself, but you would want to do a dynamic recipient in the real world. Basically, though, I'm using Teams just to tell myself in this case that it failed. But what's really important here is this: configure run after. This is the key to error handling. So what happens here is normally it's successful, but I'm actually changing it to failed. So this will only run if the previous action fails. And then the next one, I'm going to change this so that it only runs if the previous action is skipped. So basically, if the failed message isn't sent because it actually succeeded, it runs this. So it hops over that failed message. And I didn't do it in this demo, but best practice is to name your actions and also add comments. So I apologize for that. But trust me on that, you'll be grateful. So I'm waiting here, I'm waiting. Boom, there's my message. So flow failed, the flow failed to run. And then, but here, look, it says it ran successfully. And that's because the action still failed, like it did before, but then it went and it ran this Teams message after it. So even though the action failed, the entire flow did not. So you don't get those error messages saying flow failed. The error was handled. And that's error handling in Power Automate in a nutshell. Okay. So if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Or to put it another way, if your flow fails and it doesn't tell you that it failed, how do you know that it failed? So the next tip I have is kind of related to the previous example, which is about error handling. But the thing I want to talk about is sending notifications. Now, in the previous example, I was using Teams, so I'm not going to cover that. I want to talk a little bit, though, about the send notification. You can also use Outlook. The Outlook connector works really well. In some situations, you may want to use that, especially if you want to send dynamically to different people, depending on the error messages. But notification, I think, is really helpful because it can send you, the person who's developing the app, the notification, developing the flow. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate now. So here I've got a flow, and I'm going to come in here and point out that I'm using the scopes. Scopes are ways of grouping actions together. If you're not using scopes, you're missing out. It's a lot of fun. It's really helpful, especially when you're trying to debug. Because what happens here is I actually have a try, catch, finally block. It's a pretty popular way of doing a programming. So in the first block, I'm going to try and move the file, and I'm going to try and send a notification to Teams saying that I successfully copied the file. Then on the catch block, if it fails, I'm going to catch any errors, and then I'm going to use the notification connector to either email myself or to send me a mobile notification. Those are the two options. Now I'll note that the email supports HTML, but the mobile does not. So if that's something that is of concern to you, you can also use HTML with the Outlook connector. So if you need to use HTML for your solution, if that's something, then you should probably stick with email. So here we have the one other tip. I'm using the results function, which is a logic apps function, to actually get all the errors from the previous module, previous scope. Sorry. So here we have the ability to build the HTML. I'm not going to get into all the details here, but basically this is coming out of that results, and I'm coming in here and I'm building my HTML for any errors that it found, and then I'm going to send. And finally, the finally block, I'm actually going to run this rain or shine. So whether it's successful or whether it's skipped, this will always run. So the finally block always runs. So here I ran it, and this is an example of the try block failing. So again, it tried to copy it, but the file already existed in the folder. It skipped the Teams because the previous action failed, but then the scope caught the error, and the final scope actually ran because it always runs. So that's send notifications. So again, that kind of goes hand in hand with error handling, but I think it's really important, especially as you debug, that you keep track of when things are breaking. And even in production apps, I think it's good to know if there's a particular problem that keeps happening or you expect might happen, to have those notifications and send them wherever they need to go to be most useful. Also, just want to show you real quickly what this would look like on your mobile device. So this is my phone. I'm getting the approval notification in Teams. I'm going to click and open up Teams on my phone. And when I do that, this is what it looks like. I can click approve. And when I do that, it'll offer me the opportunity to offer comments. I can click submit. And then if I come back here, it takes a second here. Again, they have to have the Flow app installed. It's not called Power Automate, it's called Flow. And they'll get the notification and it'll look like this. And you see it's plain text. And then just for the hell of it, I'll show you what the email looks like as well. There's my email, and here it is with the HTML formatting. So that's send notifications. The final tip I have is about child flows. I'm not going to get into a lot of details on this. I have some resources available on this, but I want to talk a little bit about the difference of why you want to do it. So let's talk about the difference between single flows and parent-child flows. So single flows are really helpful because everything is in one flow and they don't require solutions. So if your organization is not using solutions, or if it's a simple flow, that's probably the way to go. However, it can be very difficult to bug, and error handling can get very complex the bigger your flow gets. Parent-child flows offer you reusable functionality. You can build small little flows that you can then reuse over and over again. It can be easier to debug. If there's a problem, you might be able to find it faster this way. And also, because you're building it in smaller chunks, you'll identify the problems quicker that way. You can do parallel functions, so you can run things in parallel easier. Error handling can be better. It's also much easier to import and export because you're using solutions. Which brings me to my con. It does require solutions. I don't think that's really a con necessarily. I think everyone should be using solutions. But for some people who aren't used to using them, or perhaps their organization doesn't use them, that's something that may be a deal breaker. And the last and probably the biggest con is that it does require some planning. So on that note, I'll talk about the planning. So you really need to start by designing everything first. Draw it out on a whiteboard or on a OneNote or Visio or however you want. Really think it through. How is it going to lay out? Because you have to actually start by building the child flows before you can build the parent flow. That's just how it works. You have to build the child flow first, and then you can build the parent flow. And then, oh, I have another screen I gotta edit. Hold on one second here. Sorry about that. And I was wrong about Ashley. She's actually the next. This is actually the presentation I was talking about. All right, here we go. Okay. So here we go. I'm going in and I'm going to show you really quickly how to build a child flow. I'm going to go in. First thing, reminder, it has to be in a solution. So I'm going to click on solutions and I'm going to open up a solution. I'm going to use the Northwind Traders solution, which I got from Microsoft. If you don't have this already, you can download it. Here I've got 2 child flows that I've created. And then I have down here, if I scroll down, keep scrolling, I've got a parent flow. Now, I said you have to start the child flows, but I already built them, so I'm going to start by showing you the parent flow and just give you a sense of how it works. So here we have a manual trigger, and the manual trigger basically will ask for me, the user, to enter in an order number. So that's the only input that's required. Then it's going to trigger the child flow, which was going to go out and find the order number, find the order using the order number. Then it's going to use the results from that flow to get the order details, which is another entity, using HTML action to actually build an HTML table from the second flow. And finally, it's going to combine everything together to build an email body with all the details all together. And then finally, I'm going to use the send email action to actually send that email out. And this is not necessarily a real world scenario, obviously, but I wanted to show you the kind of possibilities of what's possible with building it this way. So I'm going to run it, and let's see what happens. So do test. It's going to ask me for order number. I know the order number, 0900, click run flow, and it's already ran the first child flow. It's running the second child flow now, and boom, we have a success. And here's my email, and there's the HTML that I just created. Including a table at the bottom that I created with all the individual products that were ordered. This is the first child flow, just to sort of drill into it a little bit. And all it does basically is it looks into the orders and it finds all the orders that match the order number. This is the response it sends back to the app. So it sends this JSON back, not the app, the flow, the parent flow. So if I wanted to, I could take a look at this, I'll hit edit, and I'll just show you real quickly here. Under advanced options, I'm using OData to filter the order number equal to the order number. So OData filtering is another topic altogether. I'm not going to get into that. Here's the GUID from the first child flow. That was the input into the second child flow. And I'm going to use that here to filter the order details entity. And if I show this, you'll see here I'm filtering order ID value equals order GUID. And that's how I get the second child flow to return the order details, which I then turn into an HTML table. Awesome. Just to recap, these are my 5 tips. Use environments. Definitely take advantage of the results view as you build out your formulas and Power Apps. If you're creating apps, Canvas apps, definitely take advantage of hidden panel function from Todd Baginski. This hidden panel idea is really helpful because you can put all the documentation right there in the app. And you can also use it as a side note for debugging. So you can actually add controls that help you figure out what's happening in your app as you build it. The trace function and monitor go hand in hand, but very useful after you've built your app and you're testing it and you want to figure out, is it working well? Can it be better? Is it performing as expected? Perhaps there's some sluggishness. You can figure out what's happening there. The test studio is still a work in progress, I think. I'm including a bunch of videos in here about the test studio. So if you want to do more research on that and figure out, definitely let me know if anything about that excites you. Manual triggers. I think every time you build a flow for the first time, you should just start with a manual trigger unless you know exactly the trigger that it's supposed to be and but especially if you're going to build a complicated one, I think manual triggers is the way to go. Flow checker, very helpful for figuring out what the problems are. Error handling, big thing. I think not a lot of people do this, but I think it's really helpful as you put a flow into production that you make sure you're handling all your errors so that your end users don't have to deal with them. And as a related note to that, I think making sure that when you do have errors, that you send notifications to yourself or to the whoever the responsible parties are to let them know that their flow has issues, especially if you're using error handling, because the built-in error handling that Microsoft provides won't work if you're actually handling errors yourself. And last but not least, child flows. Again, I have some resources in here, actually from Ashley Rogers. I got a little confused as I was speaking earlier, but Ashley and John Levesque did a great video on child flows, which I included here in the links. And so definitely check that out if you want to know more about that. Just to wrap up here, some events that are coming up. I'm going to be speaking, hopefully speaking at the Dynamics Con, which is coming up in September. Their voting is still open for people to vote for the sessions they want to attend. Please, if you haven't already, please register and vote for me. I've got 2, including this session you just watched and another one called Power Apps 101. So definitely please go check that out. My user group, the DC Power Automate and Power Apps user group, is going to be meeting on August 20th. Uday Edekari, sorry about that, is going to be speaking on UI flows with Win automation to enable legacy manual tasks. Please register at flowug.com/DC. And I'm not sure if we have the page up yet to register, but it'll be up soon. And then if you want to find more events, I'll have the links so you can join. Please check out these various websites where you can find other events. And then I've got my resource links here. So everything I just went through, all there for you. And finally, thank you again. I work at AAS. If you have any questions about applied information sciences, let me know. And I hand it over back to you guys.